Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Current Situation. Here we are. We are at our third episode, one of a three-part series that Dr. Todd and I have done here together on Beyond the Current Situation. So just to recap, before I bring this amazing human on, just to recap, those that watched the rest of the other two, the two in the series, the first, Dr. Todd kind of opened our eyes and gave us some great knowledge and insight on brain health. And he pretty much unveiled the enigmatic mysteries behind it. In the second episode, we talked about age reversal. That's right. I said age reversal. I'm not saying anti-aging. It's age reversal. If you watched that last episode, is really critical to understand the difference in the work that he and his colleagues are doing and how you can double your current life expectancy. And so here we are today, coming to you with I'm going to say it is the bow that is going to wrap around all of this that we've been bringing to you, and that is the pineal tones experience. And I'm going to have him discuss that a little bit before he actually brings us into that experience. I do see that we are, yes, we are definitely live. So Dr. Todd, for those of you that are not aware, he was the first in his class in high school and also the top of his class in Northwestern University with the highest possible grade point average. After 2 years, he was accepted into an accelerated undergraduate and medical training program at Johns Hopkins University and Medical School. But what I'd like to also let you know is Dr. Todd is also a composer and at times a co-conductor of the Lumerian choirs that create patterns of tones and information that can accelerate the expansion of consciousness. And that's where the pineal tones come in. And in fact, that is where Dr. Todd is going to come in for us here today, right now. Welcome, Dr. Todd. Thanks for being here.
Welcome, Lily. So good to see you. I enjoyed our pre-conference chat as well.
Yes, we had a pre-conference chat. And because, as I always say, Dr. Todd, there's no bare bones about him. He comes with a plethora of insight and so much going on in his work. And we were really excited to bring everyone the pineal tones here today. Dr. Todd, explain to our listeners what exactly is pineal tones. We know the pineal glands exist. So let's assume that whoever's listening or watching, they know that they're aware they have pineal glands. But how does that relate to tones, and how does that relate to expanding our consciousness?
Well, I think that's more than one question.
Yeah, I know. So start part one. Question, I'm always throwing you these questions. Question.
So I think the first question is, what is a pineal gland? Then what is its relationship to consciousness? And then third, what would particular tones and tonal patterns have to do with enhancing the function and or effects of that?
Mm-hmm.
So first, for those who haven't already studied it, the pineal gland is a really interesting organ. And in certain reptilian species, the pineal gland is actually outside of the skull. So in some lizards, for example, you will see a pineal gland like in between their eyes on the top of their head. It is literally a third eye. Like not just a metaphoric third eye on your forehead that is talked about in Swami circles, but is literally a visual organ. And over millions of years, the pineal gland evolutionarily has migrated uh, back underneath the skull and into the brain. And it resides roughly, rough ballpark, in the center of the brain. Not exactly. There's a slight nuance from that beyond the scope of this discussion, but consider it roughly in the center of the head. And it's intimately tied to the visual pathways. So the eyes are connected to the optic nerve, which is connected to the optic radiations in the brain, which is ultimately connected to the occipital cortex, where the visual information is processed. And the pineal gland is intimately connected halfway through that, and in essence is monitoring our cycles of light and darkness. It is literally, in a way, an organ of light.
Wow.
Mhm. And what it does with that information, it then integrates the understanding of the most primitive light and dark, which is day and night. And for most of our history, we haven't had bright lights that create daytime conditions at nighttime. And the pineal gland is literally monitoring how the days lengthen or shorten depending upon the season. And that adjusts the larger hormone cycles. It sets when the menstrual cycle begins in women. It sets where that might conclude. It sets when the hormone changes occur in adolescence. It's probably related to the so-called andropause. That's the long cycles, also involved in the menstrual cycle, that repeating pattern. And even more than that, even the day-to-day, hour-to-hour fluctuation of all the hormone levels in our body.
Hmm.
And many of our hormones have, in their normal fluctuations, they're high at one point of the day, reach their lowest point at another time of day, are supposed to cycle in a certain way. And if there's any change from that, it suggests um, a disruption of the ideal operation of that system. So the pineal gland is regulating all of that. Its primary hormone product is melatonin, which people have heard of because it's now popular as a sleep aid. And there's significant evidence that melatonin is beneficial for more than just helping get a good night's sleep. It's an antioxidant, has longevity benefits, anti-tumor benefits, and some people are suggesting taking even bigger doses than the amount that allows you to sleep would be beneficial.
Mm. I have a question before you continue that has to
Mm-hmm.
do with something you just said before the melatonin.
Mm-hmm.
If what I'm hearing you say is that all of the things that the pineal gland controls, the light, the dark, all of that,
Mm-hmm. Right.
uh, and also the seasons and what's going on in a woman with menstruation and whatever's going on hormonally, exactly. But so my question is, because of that, is there a specific time of day that's best to exercise and practice these pineal tones?
Interesting question. And there's not a single answer.
Okay.
So now by exercise, do you mean like physical exercise or spiritual exercise?
To actually do it, to actually do the practice of pineal tones is what I meant.
Okay. Is there, it depends on which exercise you're talking about.
Mhm. Okay. So let's say I was having a group here, and s- every week, once a week, I have my group of my own little, let's say, choir, and we
Hmm.
do the pineal tones. Is it best to do it at a specific time of the day, morning, sundown, spring, summer, different season? Does any of that have, specific effects?
Those are really great questions. And we really haven't looked at that systematically or scientifically.
It'd be fun to
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
to see the stats on,
Hmm. Right.
right?
And just to give some sort of idea of what to look at and what we might test for, I would suggest the ideal would be for the pineal tones because they're about creating a certain vibrational enhancement of states of awareness. And in a sense, having a breathing space before and after to get into the state of creating them, and then also into a state of integrating the experience of it. And that the best would be first thing in the morning to create the pattern for the day. And
Mm.
then probably in the evening, but not so late that it stimulates you and keeps you from sleeping. So,
Yeah, that's why I asked those kind of
mm,
things. Yeah.
so like appropriate times that will be modified a bit depending upon when someone gets up and goes to sleep would be like 7 in the morning, like really start the day, even do it before showering, you're in the shower, and then maybe at 7 p.m.
Hmm.
So it's energizing and may also create states of relaxation, but there's like some space before bedtime and it won't.
Understood. Let's
But
say if you
sometimes
went to
it's
sleep at like
energizing.
9 or
Right,
10 p.m. or
right.
something.
Yeah.
There's actually a
So,
question, a couple of people responding on Facebook. We're live here.
yeah.
And Jackie is asking, can temperature checks on the forehead affect the pineal gland?
The I will admit that I do not have hard scientific evidence to answer that question. And the
What's your
principle,
educated guess?
okay, I was going to provide
Do you want, Jackie, do you want to know Dr. Todd's hypothesis?
that. So, my educated guess would be that the particular wavelength that's being used to do the scan is probably not going to be one that's going to be so deeply penetrating. Its primary goal is just to look at surface temperature.
Okay.
And the pineal gland from that position is quite deep in the brain. So, in all likelihood, that electromagnetic stimulus wouldn't get too close to the pineal. Now, in theory, because that's quote unquote third eye area and it's close to the visual pathways, in theory, there could be some third eye area and it's close to the visual pathways. Because
Sorry. Hmm. That's the problem when it's on live at the same time. So in theory,
Mhm. So in theory, the temperature monitoring is not designed to be invasive, just looking at surface temperature. In theory, there could be a little bit of an effect because it's near the eyes and the optic nerves, but it's probably minor. And if there's an effect on a scale of 1 to 100, I'm getting that would be about a 1. So
mm,
other things are a lot bigger factor. Um, Going through X-ray devices, being at altitude where uh, there may be more radiation. You may want to do some things to support your body after flying. For example,
mm.
holding a mobile phone up to your head is going to be much more intrusive than getting your temperature taken on the forehead.
There you go, Jackie. I hope this helps. And then so then back to also the different um hormones and how it affects someone during different times of their, I guess, hormonal patterns or whatever. Um, like I'd be very curious to do a study on a group of 12 women, like 6 that were menstruating and 6 that were not.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be really interesting to see the effects that the pineal tones had on them.
That would be a fascinating study. 'Cause you'd look
Let's
for,
do it, Dr. Todd.
okay.
Let's do it. Which means we're calling all girls that still menstruate. And then you have the people on my end, 6 and 6.
I think that'd be great. We could do the baseline hormone panels and really look to see compared to the baseline whether or not there would be a significant shift from the pattern. And if you're really being scientific, we probably want to do 6 more in each group that would
Yeah.
include the tones and see if there's any typical type of change. And it's not a big study, but it might be enough to see a direction or a trend of results. That'd be
I
interesting.
think yeah, I think it is interesting. And I think even more specific, we need the ones that are not menstruating, we need to have two different areas. The ones that do every month, but they don't happen to be menstruating at that time, and the ones that are like already postmenopausal,
Hmm.
because that's a whole nother hormonal issue or lack thereof.
Yeah, it is. That is.
Okay, so we'll have to discuss that. So now let's now that I've totally side railed us. So let's get back.
So let me answer the third part of the
Yeah.
question since we've given a little bit of a background
Mhm.
into the pineal, what it does in terms of what's known about it. The pineal gland is also considered a very esoteric organ, and it has the shape that's not unlike a pine cone. And if you see records even from ancient Sumer, you'll see pine cone-like structures, which suggest that they weren't worried about pine trees, or they're actually worried about cultivating the energy and information around the pineal gland. And from the Eastern energetic systems, the pineal gland associates with the crown chakra, the
Right.
one in the very top of the head, which has the function, it is said, of pure knowingness.
Mhm.
And when someone undergoes an enlightenment experience, activates Kundalini, balances Ida and Pingala to raise the central channel of Sushumna like a multidimensional, multicolored caduceus, that that activation process, the awakening of the pineal, is described as the opening of a thousand-petaled lotus of
Mhm.
enlightenment. So that's the esoteric description or significance of the organ. And the purpose of the pineal tones is literally tuning vibrational patterns, specifically to influence the vibrational state of the organ, potentially its physiologic state, and when it gets really into the subtle world, enhancing the vibrational state of the organ.
Mhm.
And that can be, we haven't studied it formally, but we have many, many subjective experiences of dramatic improvements in physical health, regeneration of bodily systems, and particularly states of expanded awareness. People feeling like they're moving through other dimensions, other worlds, getting information, creating, remember, new types of healing systems. We've seen a lot of that just through exposure of the pineal tones.
Well, yes, I mean, I would think that I imagine that that's because it's a multidimensional existence, truly. So if you've if you're kind of relating that to the area of where what we call the crown chakra is, for
Mhm.
instance, and now you've expanded that pineal gland, and that and if it truly connects and relates to everything that you were saying within the body, surely it connects to everything beyond the body.
Mhm. Right, logically.
Hmm. It's great. We actually have people from Costa Rica on, from Kansas. Jackie, you're welcome, Jackie. Jackie Smith Harris, and she, yeah. So Jackie, I think you're not understanding. You have to go back and listen to this after. Is that it's Dr. Todd was saying that it's so far deep that the chances it's so far embedded back here. I think you were saying that, Dr. Todd, that the
It's roughly the
chances of
center of the
that really
brain.
affecting your temperature.
Right. If you draw a line from the putative third eye area straight back, then draw a line straight from the top of your head down. It's actually just slightly back from the center. And
Hmm.
where those two lines cross is roughly where your pineal gland is.
Hmm.
So it's pretty way far away from the minor field of the thermometer. And and I think the point that people really need to be aware of is that mobile phones are going to be much more disruptive to the brain and everything in it than the very low grade probing field of a thermometer that's electronic.
That is so interesting that you mentioned that. I remember, oh my goodness, I'm going back at least 20, about 25 years when cell phones weren't as, I guess, prevalent or whatever. But they were saying back then when that was definitely affecting. It was there was a possibility of the cell phones affecting the brain and affecting. I guess it was the I forgot what you call that. What do you call that piece that people were wearing inside the ear? I don't use it, so I
The
don't know.
Bluetooth.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. I would think that has more adverse effects
Uh,
than taking a temperature.
Especially the ones that you actually put in your physical ear.
That's what
That's,
they were talking about like
that's
20
just
years ago.
that's
Mhm.
just putting it right next to your inner ear, auditory nerve, acoustic system, and the related
Mhm.
parts of the brain around it.
Yeah, and let's be honest, everyone that's listening and watching. Some people sleep with those things in their ears. Some people they never leave their phone. That's a podcast all in itself. We have to start taking responsibility for our bodies and our lives, our capital S self, by not living with these things inside your brain, inside your ear, and inside, on all the time. Think about how many hours a day that you actually have that planted on you.
Right. And that probably is a discussion for another day. The
Exactly.
the hazards and workarounds to get the benefits of the connectedness from the phone, but minimize its adverse effect, particularly on brain function.
hmm So here we are without any phones in our ears, uh, except earbuds. So let's walk us through what we can expect, or what's the first thing that we need to do or learn to start a pineal tone that's coming from in here and coming
Okay.
out of the mouth.
So the basic idea is that everything in the universe vibrates. Every structure, from something as tiny as a bond between two atoms to a skyscraper to an extension bridge to a whole planet to a bell or a tuning fork, everything vibrates as a function of what it's made of and what its geometry is. And
Mhm.
that fundamental frequency is the root frequency that will vibrate when you stimulate that system, usually with a spike of energy called a Dirac, and then that wave will go through and it will select out the natural frequency of that particular system. The idea with the pineal tones is that while the primary focus is a vibratory pattern that stimulates the pineal to function at a healthier, more youthful, higher vibrational level, that depending upon the pattern, it really is vibrating many other parts of the body and energetic systems. It's in a way, it's kind of a whole body tune-up to uh, permit higher energetic flow, higher balance, moving into expanded fields, expanding the auric field. So the pineal tones is like a signature that the pineal gland is the highest vibrational of the so-called energy centers, and higher vibration in general principles conditions lower vibrations. They
Mhm.
start from the peak and it literally goes downhill and circulates through everything else. And the pineal tone system was inspired by a friend of mine named Lee Carroll, who
I
is,
know Lee.
you know, Lee, yeah, Lee's cool, isn't he?
Oh, he's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's where I
And
met you.
all right,
Yeah, at
right.
one of his retreats.
There we go. It's all connected.
It's all connected. Lee just got a plug. We did a shout out for Lee Carroll. Yeah, it's all connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so without going into the details, because I want to actually share some tones with you,
Mhm.
that Cryan channeled some information that was inspiring to look into tones and tonal patterns that would wake up dormant functions in our DNA. And that's what became the pineal tones. And I evolved it until there were 16 levels of the tones, and each one had a focus and intention and built more and more on a landscape of opening ability or clearing that which blocks the expression of ability. When I got to the 16th level, then there was an event where Quran gave me the instruction. Like normally, Quran just gives information, and
Mhm.
this is the first time I recall that I actually got what you could call an order.
I remember you telling me that.
All
Yeah.
right. And it's like he addressed me and he said, I have an assignment for you. I'll tell
Mm.
you what it is and where it is and when it is, and you don't have to do it, but I know you will.
Because Cryon has a sense of humor.
Yes, he does. It was great. So he at that point I had done those 16 levels one at a time. He said, 16 levels is great, but there's 24. You have to remember 8 more. And then in the actual Lemurian experience, ancient experience, they weren't done one at a time, they were done in pairs. So your assignment is to remember the missing 8, remember how they pair together, remember the sequence to do them in, and recreate the ancient celebration as precisely as possible. And do that roughly 2 years from now on December 21st, 2012, which is the end of the Mayan calendar. And you need to at least have 400 people to create the effect that we're looking for. And um, it should be on the island of Maui, where it was last done 26,000 years ago.
Hence, next November 22nd,
uh,
no, November 11th, 2022.
11/11/22 will be the return to Maui after activating, it is said, a series of 12 pairs of nodes and nulls on the planet that are to become an engine of assisting to clear the accumulated negativity of millennia of human experience.
Fabulous.
And we're going to go from having two-part tones to the finale with a four-part piece that is said to further extend our awareness deep into the cosmos at a higher level. And that's what that's about. So 11, 11,
I'm getting
22.
goosebumps already. I want to go. We're all invited. Everyone's invited. We're going to put that link up on the podcast as well.
All right. And
But
if you want to do a share screen, I can actually share little stuff, including some emoto crystals for understanding, and then give at least a little experience of this.
so, what I'm going to do is add you as a host so you can share screen. How's that?
Oh, I like.
Everyone, stay tuned. You should really, this is very special to be a part of this. So, this is very special for you to be here right now. You're not here. This isn't random. You didn't just stop randomly and see us on. You're supposed to be here. So,
Okay. So let me know if you can see what's on my screen.
not yet, but press share,
Okay.
like a green, bright button.
Right. Okie doke. Share. Share screen. And which one do I hit of these choices?
You hit the, well, yeah, touch the screen that you want us to see. And then it should say
Ah,
share, and then
I
you
got
press.
it. I got it.
Great.
So I'll
Beautiful.
go through a sequence here just so you can get a feel and flavor.
So that's your whole, oh, there you go. Perfect.
Mhm.
Perfect. We can see it.
Oh, good. And I can see you as well. So we are really connected.
Yes, we are
Okay.
connected. We're here.
Hmm. So this was a beautiful piece of art from a South American artist. I think I got this
Beautiful.
when I was in Colombia, Bogota. And she named this Puerto Pineal. So this is a representation of the geometry and vibrational energy of expanding into the gateway through the pineal.
Beautiful.
And it gives a little feel and flavor for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is the first choir. So we were instructed we should have at least 400. Turned out we had over 900 choristers.
Of course you did. You're gonna have more than 400 that want to show up there, right? It's amazing.
And there were so many, we in fact had to split it into morning and afternoon choirs.
Ah, interesting.
And so our total was 900 plus, and there are
Where-
different functions of the two choirs. So it was all quite astounding. And this gives an idea. The reason for the red and the gold is that these are the colors of the royalty in Hawaii.
Oh, okay.
And
Are they also sat in right now? Did you seat them in their capabilities of what of their voices? Altos and sopranos and so on and so forth? Or
in
not?
a general sense, the
Mhm,
red choir is more the fundamental note.
mhm.
So if you're creating an open fifth, you would have the bass note, and then you would have the fifth note, which is the harmonic. So in
Okay.
general, the red choir was the fundamental note, and then the gold choir was the harmonic note.
Mhm.
So the reds would generally be deeper, the golds would generally be higher pitched, but it wasn't always the case. And sometimes they sang the same thing. Sometimes there was a pitch variability. That was
Mm.
the general principle, though. We didn't, for this choir, we didn't further differentiate it into alto versus soprano, baritone, bass versus tenor, though we
Mhm.
may for the next choir, because we're actually going to have four different sections for understanding, and then give at least a little. Okay, so there was a little feedback there. We good now?
Yeah, we're good.
Good. So that's what a full choir looks like. And the next choir will return to this same place, which
I
is
love
the Sheraton Ka'anapali, uh, near a type of beach called Black Rock that has some amazing underwater topography. So when the whales are in season, you can hear literally a whole symphony of whales when you dip your head under the water.
beautiful.
And this gives an idea. This is the map that Lee Carroll slash Croyan presented. And you see
Mhm.
right in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, that's
Yes.
where we did the first choir.
How how how'd you do it there?
Well, no, it's on Maui. That's where Maui is.
Oh, that's where Maui is. Okay, because it's
Yeah, it wasn't. We weren't on a boat. No, we were.
like
We were
it's a big ship off Maui with 900 people in robes. Just
right.
fabulous.
That's right.
Uh,
Robes and t-shirts.
Gilligan's Island.
Sit right down and you hear a tale, and so on.
So funny. I see now. I understand what you're showing me now. Okay.
Right.
Wow.
And each of these pink areas, which are the nodes, these like bright spots in the so-called crystalline grid,
Mhm,
each pairs with a specific null, like creating a literally like a battery type situation, or antenna receiver type situation. And over the past 10 years, directly or indirectly, with the choirs or things related to the choir, all
mhm,
12 node and null pairs have been literally awakened. And the next choir is about integrating and activating the whole process. So for Maui, where the first pairing was with the Tibetsi Mountains in the nation of Chad. And they're not much in the news these days. And typically the nodes are popular places like Mount Shasta,
mhm.
the outback in Australia, the sacred place called Uluru, uh, Glastonbury, uh, and so forth.
You were
So
in Bulgaria also, right? Because that is on the link, the gift that uh, we'll be sharing to other people, right? That
right,
was Bulgaria, right?
we were actually in the sacred Rila Mountains of Bulgaria for the Wisdom Choir,
Mhm.
where we presented the victory song. And you can probably find a way to share that with your people, which is kind of
Mhm,
cool.
mhm.
So that's sort of a backdrop on the scope of what's happened with this whole choir experience.
What's the
That
difference again between the pink and the blue?
the pink are called nodes,
Those are the nodes.
and
Okay.
and if you this gets really esoteric. So for those of you who aren't, well, then I'll try to say it as quickly as possible. The concept is that the crystalline grid is an informational system that stores the information of what happens with sentient beings on the planet. And the nodes are where the grid is particularly concentrated, almost like a node of your supercomputer. The
Mm,
nulls are like the null point of a battery, where the grid is very weak or not existent. And the nodes are places where people feel healthy and robust and are drawn to, whereas the nulls are places that people tend not to go. It's not as supportive of human health. And they
mm,
create like any system that has a flow, a potential difference. You have a cathode and an anode, a positive pole and a negative pole, a transmitter and receiver. So there's a relationship between the two. And I imagine if we connected all the lines, now that the pairings have been identified, it might create some interesting geometries, if that makes sense. And the
yes.
idea that's really kind of interesting from my esoteric source is that when we do the next choir, even though all these pairs are connected, that the whole system isn't activated. And that when the system is activated, the nulls will serve as literally collectors, almost like, say, trash bins for all the lower negative human emotions, pain, sorrow, suffering, and other experiences that tend to pull our experience down. And that will be literally led to or directed to its corresponding node that you could consider like a miniature solar space that would transmute that energy to clear the negativity and just simply make the energy neutral for creative purposes. So that's one of the ideas of the intention of what's going to happen at the 11/11/22 Aloha Choir.
Amazing.
So it's back to this little point, back
Hmm.
to Maui. No, that's one place that's just completely surrounded by water if you look at it.
Yes, which is fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
Waters with dolphins
Molto interessante. And whales. There were
and
humpback
and
whales that
whales.
season when we were
Yes.
there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, to give people a little experience, many of your listeners probably know about the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto, Hidden Messages in Water.
Hmm.
And he wrote some books that were really fascinating that showed if you took distilled water and you played beautiful music, you got a beautiful crystalline form. If you played uh, just jarring heavy metal music, you literally got a very fractured appearance. And then it went even further. If he like had a picture of Hitler, it would be ugly and distorted. If it was Mother Teresa, it would be beautiful. Then it went further. If he just literally wrote a word on a beaker, like love or appreciation or gratitude, it would look great. And if it were negative words, it would look ugly and distorted. So,
That's profound. That
mhm.
is so profound. Goodness gracious.
Right? Which means that every time we think something, if it's positive, it's literally restructuring the 70% of our body, roughly, that is water, into the beautiful crystalline geometries. But if it's not, then we can literally be altering the water in our bodies. So it's a very significant idea. And it's moment to moment.
Mm.
So to give you some visual on that, in addition to distilled water, which generally, if something's beautiful, the crystal looks great. If it's disharmonious, it doesn't look great. Dr. Emoto's lab, where we had the occasion to bring these tones twice, said, we're going to give you a really hard control. So we're going to give you Tokyo tap water as well. As you can see, it looks almost like a body fill on a street, and doesn't look so good. And then
It looked like a baby. Well, should I say what it looked like to me?
no, I don't
Don't.
think so.
Okay.
What I'm reading your mind in this moment,
Move on.
and it's better left for those who can read your mind, whatever they find there.
It's very dangerous that Dr. Todd could read my mind. So funny. Okay, next.
But I think everybody gets the idea that Tokyo tap water has all this distortion, both chemically and all the mental chaos of 200 million people squeezed into a
Mm,
small island. They said it's basically quite hard to get any type of good looking shape in Tokyo tap water.
mm,
And
mhm.
here's the first level of the tones in
Beautiful.
Tokyo tap water. And it's already looking not perhaps spectacular, but more balanced and pretty.
Yes.
And then distilled water is a blank slate. It's a neutral template. And the first level of the tones creates that kind of crystal.
Oh, lovely. I hope everyone's seeing this. This is great.
So as this pattern is sung, imagine that this beautiful crystalline geometry is being imprinted on all the water in the body so that the vibration, the relationships, the wave patterns are all interacting so that literally your physical body and vibration can more embody this particular type of crystalline structure.
Mm.
And it was interesting in Tokyo tap water, you saw like the emergence of this type of pattern coming through. It hadn't fully articulated itself because of all of the adverse energy it had to go through. But here in distilled water, we see the fully evolved template. And now for an experience. So the first level of the pineal tones, which was inspired by an esoteric idea that most people operate from a four-dimensional reality, and there's an eight-dimensional reality that's blocked by an eight-dimensional filter. So the pineal tones are basically the answer to the question, how do you unblock the filter? And in a Saturday meditation, I began to get the solution, which was to create tones and tonal patterns in a certain way with a specific intention. And the first level came with a particular affirmation. And it came in all three persons. For ease, I'll just say it in the first person, which is I, as a being, am eternally pure and perfect. And anything that appears to be other than perfection is merely the illusion of this experiment of our experience. So,
I, as a being,
am eternally pure and
am
perfect.
eternally pure and perfect. Anything other than
Anything that appears to be other than perfection
is an
is
illusion.
merely the illusion of this experiment of our experience.
Great affirmation. So, so now one would speak this affirmation going into that first tone, the first level, level one.
It's something to recognize, and it's useful to repeat the affirmation. The intention of this level crystallizes simply to remembering your divine eternal perfection.
Mhm.
You know, so the purpose of the affirmation is to sort of break out of the concept that we're generally not programmed or taught that, well, actually we're eternally pure and perfect. Actually, we're just here as the experiment of our soul to have greater awareness of who and what we are. And if anything appears to be other than perfection, it's merely an illusion that we've created to have this experience of learning and evolving and being able to experience more of who and what we really are. And that,
Perfect.
yeah. And that's simply stated as remembering your divine eternal perfection.
Mhm.
So some of the translation, this is most represented today as the language of the Hunakane, the shamans that have been the successors to the original shamans. And mana generally represents the supreme life force energy. And kama, ka is, as it were, the energy of the heavens. Ma is the energy of earth. So it's the balance of the energy of earth and the heavens.
Mhm.
And kama also in some systems is used as a phrase for ecstatic experience. So I will share this with you so people can have an experience of what happens with the vibrational patterns, and I would suggest that people close their eyes and tune in if they're not driving or operating heavy machinery. And
That's a good point, people. If you are, that means you should be working. You shouldn't be on this live, first of all.
or come back later. It's even
I'm
more
back
good.
later.
Right. In
Yeah,
fact,
and when you come back later, Dr. Todd is suggesting that, of course, you're sitting in your space, your other devices are all off, you have no distraction, and he suggests closing your eyes.
absolutely. And actually, I will do this twice. One, just so everybody can hear what it's supposed to sound like, get a feel and flavor for it. I'll do it once more with the invitation to sing along because it creates another flavor if you replicate the pattern with your own body, because then it tunes you even more to your own internal vibrational pattern. So here
Great.
we go.
That's the first round.
So for part two, I advise that you, if you can, close your eyes. Well, if you're trying to read the syllables, then you can open or close your eyes, but really tune into the experience. And you might even feel into, as it were, the region of the center of your brain and note if there are any subtle vibrational happenings going on there. And then notice how your awareness may have shifted, how you see colors, your perception of things in the room, whether you perceive more than meets eye, whether you get subtle hints more closely and so forth. All of those things can be associated.
I will say that I was listening with my eyes closed. I opened them in the beginning because I was watching the syllables. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I closed my eyes at the last three, the only reason why I closed my eyes was because I was feeling from the first two, the first two lines,
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling right in my core of my brain. I was like, whoa, it was crazy. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great description.
Okay. So let's do it, everyone.
Here we go. Om.
That was really beautiful. And I have one of the activation codes that I showed you earlier, previous
Mhm.
our little personal discussion before this. I have one of them up on my screen still from earlier
Uh-huh.
before,
Sure.
and it's like powerful. It's
Uh-huh.
so bright. Y- When you're doing this, although it's coming out of your mouth, I can feel that it's coming from your pineal. How do you do that?
You are very attuned. You're very tuned. It's sort of set up as a transmitter system. And so the vibratory tones, which are more than just vocal cords, at a certain level, the patterns are being made from the total cellular structure of the body. And the vocal apparatus is simply the final translation of that. And that focuses almost like powering up the transmitter station of the pineal, and then it can transmit from there. And the concept in a choir is that the pineal glands of the choristers are connecting in an interdimensional way and creating a group field, unified field transmitter through the cosmos
Mm,
that that you
that-
can then reverse polarities and create a group field receiver as well and get lots of information. We've done that before.
that's amazing. So, if I'm to understand this, this is level 1 and you have this 24 that you do, and you do as the with the group, obviously. But is this something, did you want to show us another level, or should we go off screen share so people can see?
No, I want to share a few more because it's cool.
Okay. So this is level 1 and you go through this once and then you go right into level 2 as you practice.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Well, you learn them 1 through 24 in sequence to be able to sing them, and then in performance are actually done in pairs. Then the pairs are in a particular sequence. And 1 through 24 was the first choir, but we've had several choirs since then, and more content that is beyond the actual ancient material to the modern and future material.
Hmm.
But the first 24 is a very good amount with which to begin. And for those interested, I've just finished filming the third of 4 modules of training, which is really done in lovely HD, actually done with Lee Carroll in his new uh, professional studio. And the first 2 modules are levels 1 through 24. Then the third module is the next level is up to 29. The fourth will be the highest levels plus the Lemurian lullabies and the victory song. And then the finale piece as well, that'll be in 4 parts. So the first 2 modules will be done quite soon. If people really want to learn and train these things and get a greater depth of information, they will be available, whether someone is interested in going to a choir or not. The patterns have their own vibrational intentions that are about health, longevity, rejuvenation, regeneration, opening communication, clarifying the brain, getting creative
Yes.
ideas, all that good stuff.
Which is why we did this as the third episode. That's why I say it's like a bow that wraps around what we've been talking about, and what you've been sharing with us. There is someone that it has been tuned in here with us here on Facebook Live, and he said he finds it relaxing. What does it do to the person producing the sound? So what does it do to you while you were doing this sound for us?
Part of the same, it's generally relaxing. We have done some of more of the conventional musical pieces I've done, subjected them to heart rate variability testing, and we've seen that it greatly increases so-called HRV very quickly, which means the stress response is being turned off and the rest, repair, and digest response is being turned on. And then it's subtler than that. It has to do with what I call the tuning of the perceptual organs. So after just doing even that one simple tone, I'd say that the events of the morning, going through traffic, getting here, doing the usual stuff to get ready to be on the line today, sort of can leave you in a state where you have to kind of reconnect and recenter. And just doing that short piece for a little while, everything feels centered, balanced, clear, vision is clear. Uh, it's moving towards 360-degree vision. The cells of the body feel alive. The sensorium is very alert and aware. The physical senses are activated. So I'd say it does all those centering and balancing things, and can gradually open up layers that can be physical, emotional, or particularly where my focus often is, opens up the ability to perceive what I would call interdimensional information, wherever you want to say those things are from. And that could just be like you get a sense that, oh, I'd really like to call my friend, and then the next thing you know, they're calling you. So you, at some level, you may realize that you're able to tune in a more sensitive and precise fashion than before.
Precisely.
Or,
It
yeah.
it's like what I'm hearing you say in a sentence is it's really bringing a congruency in health, not just in your physical health,
Mhm.
but everywhere. Like you say, body, mind, and logic, right? So it's like a whole congruent uh expansion of health and wellness and plain old feel great.
there's a lot. There's a lot to be said for feel great. We're all into that.
Absolutely. Who doesn't want to feel great? Who, when people say be great, if you're great, it means you feel great and you do great things, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. To expand and evolve and do that all the time in all areas. Kind of the
Hmm.
general concept. There's an art to doing it in the various key areas of life. That's a different uh, technological discussion, but there's art to that as well, which is super cool. That goes back 5,000 years.
Hmm.
And the tones are said to go back 26,000 years. And just for fun, I'd like to give you a few more, and then you can show
Yeah.
your art as well. So for
Ooh.
each of the 24 levels and beyond, we work with this brilliant artist named Deborah DeLisi, who for each pattern joins me and a few others that are, you would say, visionaries. And we see what images and geometries and colors and dimensionalities are associated with each particular tone pattern. And this is for the level 1 pattern. And we actually see that everything starts at the center of the brain. You
Hmm.
see all these spiral nebulae patterns and geometries that are multi-layered arising out of that in more Eastern mystical type symbols, and all this being activated and generated even by the first level of the tones, which how many of your activities start with remembering that you're eternally perfect to start with, and you're just playing the game of becoming more self-aware. So that's where it begins, which is fun.
That's absolutely beautiful. And I could see the spirals going counterclockwise
Hmm.
and clockwise, right?
Right.
They're
Yeah,
creating and they may be discreating or whatever.
right.
Beautiful.
Like the yin yang, continuous
Yes.
destruction and creation, which even the quantum physicists say is in the deepest subatomic nature of our reality. So for level 2, this is Tokyo tap water. This is actually a beautifully articulated crystal in water that almost never allows you to see anything.
Mm.
And what's fascinating, you see that the points are small here and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the intention of this level is acceleration and amplification. So the points of the crystal are actually echoing that idea of accelerating and amplifying and building and growing. You get through one cycle and they set another cycle of making it bigger and another cycle of making it bigger. The so-called hermeneutic positive spiral of learning as you retread information and apply to everything you've learned from the last cycle. And this is in distilled water, which is this beautiful pattern that I interpret as seeing the expansion happening from all the points at the same time.
Beautiful.
And the pattern itself is really very simple. I can just describe it. It's simply an and it starts out very slowly, goes faster and faster and faster till it's really fast, and then goes once more slowly. And that really is about having initiated the process. Now it's time to accelerate and amplify it. And that's the art for it.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's
Isn't that
really
cool? Yeah.
It's really cool. I have to put my glasses on for that just to see the brightness of the top. So pretty.
Yeah, it captures the feeling of acceleration and amplification quite nicely.
And I noticed this 10 is that 10. 1, 2,
That's
4,
Roman numeral 2.
6,
So
8.
it's the second level.
Okay.
Now, this gets really interesting, at least as far as my worldview goes.
Hmm.
Now, here we have a six-sided crystal that has 9 points. And I've looked at many, many of these Emoto photos, and I've not seen any other that had 9 points. I've seen some with 7, a rare one with 8, but not one with 9 points. And why this is interesting is that the third level literally has 3 sets of syllables, and each set of syllables has 3 syllables. So the tonal pattern is 3 sets of 3 syllables. And here we see literally 3 sets of 3 points. So it's literally a physical description in Tokyo tap water, which normally shows nothing of the vibrational intention and attributes of the tones. And
That's
if that
amazing.
isn't that wild?
Yeah.
And
Wild.
we like wild.
We
We
like
live.
wild. Anyone that's been watching, we like to get wild. This is so, so cool.
Now,
Seriously.
if that isn't cool enough, check out the geometry of this pattern in distilled water.
Huh.
So we see an almost perfect so-called Mogan David, Star of David, two-dimensional geometry that is suggestive of the three-dimensional geometry, which will be described as the Merkaba, which is a tetrahedron pointing up and a section with one pointing down. And then if we talk about it energetically, one spins counterclockwise, the other spins clockwise. So they're contraposed, convertating fields of light that balance body, mind, and being. So literally, this is suggesting that just singing this pattern literally creates from head to toe the sacred geometry of the Merkaba in all the cells of the body.
This is so powerful. I mean, even for those that aren't familiar with this, I I could feel I can feel the energy just from looking at this. I don't know if it's a combination of just being connected to that and reacting to that, but and and the fact that you just did those tones or a
Mhm.
combination of both. But
Right.
I can and how crazy is this? Everyone that can watch this, this will go into audio indefinitely, but this will be available also in audio. You should go back and just look at this. I mean, you could see the Star of David. You could see it, the Star of David right there. You could see that Merkaba. And this is, remind them, this is crystallized. This is all crystallization, correct?
Yeah, this basically was distilled water that we had a group of people singing this tonal pattern in Dr. Masaru Emoto's lab in Tokyo. And this is what they developed it when they froze the water.
So, just to put this in perspective for our viewers, this makes it so clear that the effects from doing the pineal tones are real. It's not something hokey. I mean, this is the real deal. This is just amazing for me to see this.
I'm glad you're seeing the light.
Seeing the light. No, it's just amazing. And I'm actually extra blessed because when you were going to come on and do the Pineal tones and give us this experience, I had no clue that you were going to be showing us, how it results with with the distilled water. This is fantastic. It's a great visual.
Thank you. It's also my experience that this was a big, like, holy cow. That's really amazing because that pattern is so significant.
It's so significant. It's like ridiculously significant.
And
Oh my god.
it could hardly be more geometrically perfect either.
True. So true.
Yeah. So let's do the pattern and see how that feels. And then I'll show the art, which is also pretty amazing. And that'll probably where we'll wrap the demonstration for today. We could take it further later. So the third level has the intention, literally, of a return to the seed sound of creation. And for those of you who've studied Eastern systems, there's an ancient language called Sanskrit, and you've probably heard the word called Om, which is considered the seed sound of creation. And if you play Om in a container of water, it actually creates a very complex pattern called the Sri Yantra, which is 9 different triangles that intersect in a particular way. So something very simple creates very complex patterning. The intention then is literally a return to the seed sound, the original creative energy. And when you return to that point, then depending upon your intention, you may create in a little bit different way, a little bit more evolved way, a little more that taking everything you've learned, you may shift the pattern a little bit to get an even better result than you've gotten before. So this is pretty quick. I'll do it once just to demonstrate, then once more for people to chime in, show the art, and then we can say our concluding comments. So here we go. No more. And we
That's
can
great.
thank you.
Yeah, that was great.
Mhm.
So that was level 3, everyone. And now I believe is going to show us some visuals on that.
Well, I'm actually give y'all a chance to sing along with it, then I'll show you the visuals.
Oh, great.
It's even more powerful if you sing it too.
Okay.
Here we go. It's short, but intense.
Zapala.
Mhm.
Okay.
And
Oh,
Ah.
I'm wondering, if any of you all did this on your end, just let us know in the chat. I had to come a little away from the mic. I didn't want to ruin his great tones. So it's so interesting because from my, my first time trying it, like clearly for me, the impulse is to kind of sing it like Zappa, right?
Right.
But when you realize it's coming from in here,
Mm-hmm.
it brings on a whole different what's the word I'm looking for? It's just a whole new animal. It's
Right.
yeah, which is
Right.
kind of why you go in and out and you could hear it like you could hear it like back here. Like I
Right.
could hear it from you through the mic. I feel like you're right here in the room with me doing that. That's how much I could feel it right in the core of my brain, right in the middle of my skull.
Excellent description of it. That you're really very perceptive. And part of what you are tuning into is a difference between just singing a musical note at a pitch and using a technique to make it more total body, and more technique, which would include creating overtone harmonics.
Mm,
So, for example, it's a difference between singing just an E, which is already pretty, but it is quite different if you do the technique to create overtones, which is more like, which has a
wow,
much deeper effect.
that's that's just amazing. Someone says I have to say that on one of the tones I tried to produce, I could feel it in the core too. That's great, Thomas. That's what Thomas is saying. Someone else, Jackie's still on with us. She says, yes, very penetrating. Uh, and then she also says, he sounds, he's a sound machine. Wait, wait, what's the 70s or 80s? Uh, I'm just a love
Love
machine.
machine.
So Todd is just a sound machine. And I'm gonna that's so great.
Right?
Um, very powerful. Someone else said, Gary says, yes, very powerful and mind blowing, all very deep and thought provoking information. Okay, so that's not about the tones, but yeah, it is. And he wants to soak it all up. And so, yeah, speaking of which, Jackie said amazing. Speaking of which, to soak it all up, you come back and you listen to this, you rewind and go through this, right, Dr. Todd?
Right. These tones can be done repeatedly. It's even been suggested that these tones were used for regeneration in ancient times, and that the more you would do them, the more would have an age reversal effect. So there's a usefulness in singing the patterns and singing them regularly, because it's a way of, one is just a way of internally tuning and getting yourself out of stress, out of fight or flight, calming the mind. So getting into the, particularly the emotional and mental state where you can tune into body, mind, and emotion and perceive reality accurately and make your best choices in terms of which approach is going to give you the best results that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And just to underscore what Dr. Todd is saying, um, And if you wanted to go to any visuals, you can while I'm talking, it's fine. But
Sure.
I just want to say when he talks about regeneration, one of the things that that I do, that I'm always doing, is helping clients unplug. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is a great way to unplug from any
Mhm.
of the conditioned mind patterns, whatever's going on in the mind. And then from that point that you're unplugged, then you can regenerate really at a cellular level or molecular level, if you will, from the inside out. And from that point, then you can manifest all of the things that serve you well. And hence that whole congruency of expansion of consciousness, and expansion of your physical health, and expansion of your life expectancy and your brain health, and so on and so forth.
Beautifully stated. And for your visual interest, this is the art that our artist Deborah Talisi created before she saw the developed crystals from Tokyo.
Wow, I love the key, first of all, on top.
Mm-hmm.
Love the key,
And
especially
it's amazing that she actually saw and drew the three-dimensional Merkaba,
on top.
which is the taking the 2D uh, Star of David into a three-dimensional star tetrahedron. She saw and recorded and did a beautiful representation of it before we got the crystals back from Tokyo. This is what she saw. So her internal perception matched what the physical crystal showed.
That is beautiful. That is amazing.
And you get the flavor of the seed sound, the energy and evolution, and the creative steps and moment to moment adjustments to environment for something to learn and grow that is represented in that concept of the seed.
Hmm.
And for those that are interested, you can see all of the art for the 24 levels and beyond, uh, and other types of visionary work. She's really quite extraordinary. Uh, so it's delisiaart.com, and
Amazing.
there's just
Beautiful.
super cool stuff to see.
That is just amazing. I love it. Um,
And I'll show you one more thing.
that,
I won't
that looks different.
sing it. This is the fourth level, and the fourth and fifth level are about mining the Akashic records. And what's really interesting, so this is Tokyo tap water. That's, it's a nice crystal, which is cool. But what gets really interesting is that in distilled water, we see this gorgeous crystal. We actually see colors. The colors magenta and turquoise. And there's work that shows a thin film crystal of DNA shows exactly those same colors. So
Yeah, I see those colors in the kind of the middle left, right?
correct. Yeah, that subtle turquoise and magenta. They said in the lab they occasionally see those colors. And at a future time, if you like, I can actually show you work done in a crystallography lab showing a thin film crystal of DNA, which has essentially the same shades of those two colors.
Hmm.
So when two things are in resonance with each other, they will tend to vibrate the same way, tend to have the same color association. It's all about harmonic sequences of vibrations. This is just an indicator that these tones and tonal patterns, if they're creating the same color as a crystal of DNA, that they're also in resonance with DNA. So an intriguing note upon which to wrap this discussion.
Repeat that for our listeners in case they were fogging out on us. If because I find this, because to me that is so profound what you just said. If they're producing the colors of DNA, then they are connected. No, you
In
used a
resonance with,
specific word. They're in resonance with DNA.
right. The
That's
metaphor would
profound.
be, let's say you play a tuning fork. If you're a
Mhm,
musician, say it's an A440,
mhm.
and you strike it, and you hear that particular note, and there's a piano in the room, and the string that will resonate will be the A440 string on the piano, because it has the same resonance, and the impulse at that frequency will stimulate the amplification of energy in the string that's tuned to it. And then let's say in the same room there's a guitar, and you hit the tuning fork, and the A440 string rings on the guitar. So both of these are in resonance with the tuning fork. Now the next step of the experiment would be to either pluck the A440 string on the guitar or play the A440 on the piano, and they'll each cause each other to ring. So it's almost like that. If uh, if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, sort of a thing in terms of
Mhm,
the relationship. So if
mhm.
two things are each in resonance with something, then they will tend to be in resonance with each other as well. So here we're saying that this crystal is in resonance with these particular color frequencies. And then we're saying that a thin film crystal of DNA creates these same color frequencies, that these vibrational patterns would also be in resonance with DNA itself.
Beautiful. And they may not necessarily, your analogy with the tuning fork and then the piano and then the guitar and so on in the same room, it doesn't really have to be in the same room, does it? Because we can do this around the globe
Right,
together in
right,
and right?
absolutely. Yeah. Huh. So, I mean, one ideal someday, in addition to having the choirs where we gather many people in person, because it's quite an extraordinary experience with hundreds of people singing these patterns all together in a space. It's uh, profoundly, how you say, electric, and it can be quite transformational with everyone bringing to and from what they're bringing to and what they're ready for. And then there's another idea at some point, maybe one of the benefits of the recent issues with the virus in question is that we've gotten a lot more accustomed to communicating online. And I could see a time where we really gathered many, many people around the world to sing these patterns, because they're personally balancing. And the more people that sing them, the greater the field of balance that creates, even enough possibly to create a difference for a city or a country or even a globe.
Yes, absolutely. And that, in fact, is, I mean, isn't that the idea of where we want to go, uh, even pre-COVID? That,
Oh, for sure.
you know,
That
that
ideal hasn't changed. It just might make it seem even more attractive after what we've experienced.
yeah, it just accelerated everyone to learn how to do this, come on here, do things, but to connect where you didn't feel like, like you could be there in person. Well, now you can connect through vibration and energy, uh, synchronicity.
Yep, exactamente.
Amazing. So, is that the last photo that you're showing us?
I think that's a good place to end it on that
Yeah, I think that's a
discussion.
good place too, and that's absolutely fabulous. This Lisa, so
Deborah DeLisi.
Deborah DeLisi. Okay, I was memorizing the middle of her name.
Right, right, you are.
If you go off, stop screen share, it'll bring you back in a
Okay.
larger form.
Gotcha.
and people can, okay, great. You know, what's really interesting, only because this was, by the way, such an amazing experience. And if we do this, if we did this, even at just even these first 3 levels, just to practice this at whatever time, like we suggested earlier for those that maybe just joined, because I had asked about maybe a time of day. So maybe 7 in the morning, 7 at night, assuming that, you know, like the rest of us slaves, we wake up at 6 and go to sleep at 10.
What do you really
Like,
mean? What do you really feel?
if you're someone that doesn't work and you sleep and you stay in bed till 10 and 11 a.m., wake up and start your pineal tones and get with the program, because this is so invigorating, energetic, electric, and but above and beyond, it it brings you to a space that you're not going to get. And I don't know why I'm saying this right now, because this is always an organic conversation, but it brings you to a space that you won't get when you're having a glass of wine, when you're taking some whatever medication, if you're doing this drug or that. For some reason, something's telling me to say this, because I'm finding that every single day, I think 3 times in the last 24 hours, I saw, I just read about just the horrifying violence that's going on just in 24 hours, just in one state. You multiply that time in the nation, multiply that around the globe. So we need to start to reverse. We need to start reversing this, and it takes one person at a time, and to turn off or tune out and say, I can't watch the news, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. I get it. But also, don't numb yourself to it. Numb yourself to this. Unplug to things like this, everyone, so that you get on the program, so you get off, unplug from the program of this external minutia, and get on like the real train. Get on this new space where you can regenerate. This doesn't cost a dime, you guys, to do this. This doesn't cost a penny. You know what it costs? It costs your time, and it costs your willingness or your choice to try something that is pure and organic and and profound for your healing and for your expansion, not just consciousness, but as it also wraps around your physical health, uh, body, mind, and being health. And that's basically that's basically what I just felt like I had to say after that whole experience, because you could look at something and say, oh, that's so weird. You know what's weird? What's weird is that there's discord. What's weird is that there's hate. What's weird is that there's violence. This isn't weird,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. Right. We've been conditioned to think that violence is the norm, that it's appropriate to be a thoughtless sheep that don't do their own homework when we're being subjected to things which could be very destructive to us, that's driven by another agenda. We're encouraged to be as distracted and confused and wrapped up in unimportant conflicts as much as possible. And that is the trend that anyone who wants to really grow and expand has to get out of, one way
Yep.
or another.
Yes.
But the first is to realize I'm actually working with a grand master whose tradition goes back from an unbroken lineage of grand masters all the way to Lao Tzu. And that system is really simple. I mean, they have the yin yang symbol, and they basically describe that there is either the matrix or the energy. It's as simple as that. It's like not all 15 different shades of gray. It's like either you're in matrix thinking or royal thinking. You're in matrix thinking or matrix emotions or royal emotions. You're focused on the body elements that the matrix tells you versus you're into the royalty of the body. And each of those royalties has an almost infinite amount of information for you if you can turn off the chatter of distraction from the matrix about confusion, chaos, distraction, feeling less than, getting put in a box. And so the tones are one way to really get out of the box. There are 101 or 1,001 ways to get out of the box. But the first most important thing is is just for someone to know that there is a distinction and to realize we're in the matrix when they're in the matrix versus when they're in the energy. It's like, oh, I'm in the matrix. There's confusion, chaos, distraction, disruption, accusation, uh, and I need to get back in the energy. So, but unless you're even aware enough to know that there's a distinction, then people just stay stuck in the matrix because the matrix is acting all the time.
Exactly. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what we need to unplug from.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Unplug from the matrix, unplug from, in fact, when you talk about, when you talk about this, the dialogue that's going on in your mind, and then you talk about unplugging from that, it's almost like people are so used to it that there's a constant static, like in the old days when we had radio or you had television and you turn and then it would go off in the middle of the night. There was no TV. That's right, guys. There was no television shows in the middle of the night. And if you fell asleep with the television on, it would be like this. Shh, just kind of that white, right? That static. Same thing with the radio. Now, I actually, we were raised without a television, but I learned this at friends' houses. Oh, there's no TV in the middle of the night, but it does this. Same thing with the dialogue that goes on in the mind. You get so used to the constant battle in the mind. It's like a battlefield going on that when you unplug, I believe that you have the opportunity to really enlighten and really feel, because and really say, oh my goodness, this is what it really is, once you unplug from that matrix.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's completely different experience, subjectively and energetically. You have to get this. The trick is realizing that there is the opportunity to be in what is called the energy and to know how to get out from the matrix using that lingo into the energy. If you're not aware that it even exists, then you'll just be. I mean, but one of the statements the Grandmaster makes, which is probably profound, which is, if you get involved with the matrix, you will have an unsuccessful life. If you stay in the energy, then you have the ability to have a successful life. It doesn't guarantee it. There's still work to do. And the key point is that you always have to reach for the energy because the matrix is always trying to suck you back.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
If you stay in the matrix, you don't have a chance of a successful life.
Yeah, simple as
That's
that.
wow. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because you and I talked about, I think it was the first episode that we did, and we talked about, like, when you see a film and you see, craziness and superheroes and something innately in it there, you think, oh, it kind of revs you up or makes you feel a certain way, like you feel a little bit more empowered yourself. Well, I was thinking just at this moment about that film, The Matrix.
Right.
That was, by the way, that was a brilliant film. Shout
Mm-hmm.
out to that producer and that writer.
Yeah.
and everyone involved. That was a brilliant film. So if you all don't understand the difference between the matrix and energy, if you want to use that terminology, or the conditioned mind patterns and your attachment to all of those things that are running your life and running your mind and energy, then if you're not aware of that, if there's anything that you take away from this podcast today, is that awareness. We're just telling you that that's what's going on. Whether you believe it or not doesn't stop it from happening. You just have to have that awareness. Once you understand that that exists, then you can do these things to help you unplug from it and really connect. I want to just see if anyone has someone said exactly. I guess one has to look at the source. There's so many responses here. You can't change the world, but you can change your mindset. Well, that's for another podcast, Jackie. I believe we can change the world one person at a time. Maybe not everyone in the world, but I believe we can, right? Uh, but it does start with changing. Well, there's a whole connection of body, mind, and being. So the mind, the heart, right? And intuition. The Matrix is not scientific. It's a documentary. Oh, that's what someone said. Well, we're talking about the idea of a matrix. Am I right, Dr. Todd? We're talking about.
Right. In this context, this is a description of the basic forces of reality. And it's based on principles that go back 5,000 years to the origin both of Chinese energy medicine and the martial arts, all the way back to Lao Tzu. And the symbolic representation is the yin yang symbol. And basically, the matrix is not being used as a technical definition, it's being used as a description of being on one side of the yin yang symbol or another.
Exactly.
You can be on the matrix side where it's all, let's just call that the black color, just for because our association with black hats and white hats. So you can be like immersed on the black side, and that's the matrix that wants to distract you, keep you feeling small, keep you feeling in a little box. And the white is that little oasis of the energy that may give you an idea that there's a way to get out of it. And then if you get into the energy side, it's this wonderful field of energy, but there's still distraction, there's still work to do, that little black dot that's in it. But it's much more productive. It's much more likely to grow and evolve and expand and have better and better and higher experiences if you stay on the energy side and you have the typical distractions and challenges of a little dot of black to resolve. But if you're mostly in energy, you've got lots of resources to see reality, be alert and aware and accurate, and choose the best options to navigate from one step to the next to have the best chance of creating what you would like to manifest in the most expansive and extraordinary way. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the meaning of the matrix versus the energy in this context. You can really describe it as one part of the symbol of the Tao versus the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would you, and this is a whole nother podcast, but I'm just now I need to ask this question, and I don't know if anyone will understand this on here, but maybe you will, because we've got about 8,000 people that follow, even more on Facebook. So who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, The ones that unplug and are connected and do become enlightened, uh, i- is this would this be considered, because we were just talking about changing the world, and I mean I agree with Jackie in a sense where you're not going to change the whole world, but would you say that this is what's putting together the 144,000?
I would say so. I understand your reference there without going into the
Mhm.
description at this point, that there are many statements made by famous people that really celebrate the importance of one person or a small handful of people to create a constructive change to shift the model, to shift the paradigm. That it almost always happens with a handful of enlightened few. There may be one person that sparks the idea, but there always needs to be some support group that adds the missing elements to create a cohesive field. So if the goal is to change the world, I believe it's always individual and collective. Like any little tiny step anyone makes to, in this metaphor, be more in the energy than the matrix, or to achieve a higher calibration over the work of um, Dr. David Hawkins and Power versus Force. Any any step, no matter how small it seems, for any person forward takes the whole forward. And the whole going forward makes it easier for any person anywhere to take another step forward. And the metaphor is probably best illustrated by that Dr. Seuss book, Horton Hears a Who,
Ah,
right?
interesting. It's a
Because
great
like the whole civilization was screaming and they're about to be destroyed, but only if the message could be communicated would it be heard and they wouldn't be destroyed. And it was that one little extra yop. I think that was actually worded in this one little yop from this last person that took it past the threshold. We call it critical mass, the kindling point, and then the message was heard, and then the whole system was, in this case, saved. But you could also look at that as a metaphor for transformation, evolving to the next level, the next organizational pattern of information and energy, and so forth. So each
It's
individual step needs to be celebrated. That's sort of the key. And
yeah.
that's if we're really going to extend this metaphor, it probably would be the material for another full discussion, that it is a matrix trick to tell any person that your action doesn't matter, your vote doesn't matter, what you do or think is insignificant.
I
Everything
You just took
can
it
be.
right out of my brain. I'm so in synchronicity right now. I'm so like in sync with what you're saying.
Mhm.
And I feel so bad. I just interrupted you. I apologize. But it was like, if there's anything else, another takeaway number two is, first of all, you guys, and I say it all the time, if you go on any of my social media, you read any of my articles, you go on my website, you are so significant in the landscape of the universe. So if this is true, why wouldn't the thing that you do be so important in advancing the kingdom, the world, the globe? Right. You're so significant. Everything is significant. Otherwise, you might as well just throw your hands up in the air and just give up.
The metaphor of this set of entanglements called the matrix is it wants to put you in the smallest box possible. And the metaphor of the energy is that there's no limit to how much you can expand. And it's independent of your race, color, creed, gender, chronologic age, or any other factor. The biggest issue is whether you can overcome literally those experiences you were programmed to, those beliefs that were instilled in you. And can you look at those in a unit of time with your full awareness and decide whether that's really you or that's somebody else's and you want something else?
Exactly. Beautifully put. And this is not the first time that we're saying this. I mean, I even Dr. Todd I think it was after the first or second episode, maybe the second episode is, look, just to simplify, even when I ask him, you know, what makes him tick, his answer was that it was really nothing specific, but something more general. But there's really nothing general about it, uh, about the fact that we have, well, it is general, but to some people looking at this from their perspective, they may not see it as general, but it should be general in that we have the innate ability to expand, expand our consciousness, expand our lifespan, expand our heart, expand our connectedness, expand everything. And so one of the things I believe that you said, that that's what makes you tick, is actually helping advance that and expand that. And we have that ability to do so.
Mhm. Right, personally and collectively.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, this was again a fabulous discussion, and also insight on exactly that, on exactly how we can expand ourselves in this particular episode, podcast, expanding consciousness, expanding health, and um, just once again a plethora of knowledge and fun. And we got a little wild, you guys, and and we had a lot of comments. We have about 40 comments on here. Jackie says we've been programmed and indoctrinated from birth. We have to get out of the matrix. Yes. See, so now Jackie understands what we're talking about, when we talk about the matrix. Exactly. That's the whole, what I call the unplugging, what Dr. Todd calls, I guess, disconnecting from the matrix or whatever, right?
Uh, Jumping from the matrix to the energy.
Yeah, jumping from the matrix to the energy.
Right.
And it's actually, it's a nice visual. If you have seen that film, watch, everyone go on Netflix tonight and look up the matrix. I know what you're all up to. But if you could get that visual, even of when they jumped, they were in those chairs, right? In the dark with the wires all connected, and they would, right? And then they would do what they had to do to try and get back out from that disconnection and then go back into the matrix so that they could, interestingly enough,
Mm-hmm.
not die.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Really. What I would put to you is, you want to double your life expectancy? You want to have peace in your life? You better unplug. Better unplug. Just saying. Just saying. If you enjoyed this podcast, this will also go into Beyond the Current Situation in audio. I want you to head over there, Beyond the Current Situation podcast. I want you to subscribe. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, give it 5 stars. We appreciate that. But also, you're going to look in the notes of this particular podcast and the description notes, and you will have, there's a gift there that Dr. Todd has so generously offered. You're going to click on the link in the description. It's a free download of the pineal tones that does take place in, it's the victory song, I believe, that we have there, that was recorded in the Rila Mountain,
Rila Mountains of
Rila
Bulgaria.
Mountains of Bulgaria. So head on over there to Beyond the Current Situation and subscribe, click, and get that free download. And hey, I'm just going to encourage you to go ahead and try these pineal tones, and try them yourself, and go back, and you could rewind, and you have all level 1, level 2, and level 3 that Dr. Todd has so generously went over with us, and has given us a great description and all those beautiful visuals. So, one other thing I wanted to mention before we go is also to remind you, if you want to go and join, I should say join us, because I really, I did put it on my calendar. Maui, November. It's 11
11.
2022. So it's November 11th of next year, right around the corner. Believe it or not, it's only a year away. 11/11/2022. Powerful numbers. It was a powerful, not a suggestion, but what did Cryon? I'm going to say he
It was an
didn't so much.
assignment.
He what?
It was an assignment.
It was an assignment.
Right.
It's interesting. So it was an assignment. I'm going to call it an appointment. Dr. Todd, in my view, was appointed to do this from a higher calling, if you will, or a voice on the other side of the veil, if you will, however you want to see it. This is my view. And I'm allowed to say my view because it's my show. You know, silly Lily. But this is my view from the bottom of my heart. I know that he calls it an assignment. I found it to be, even before we did our first episode and I emailed him, we emailed a little back and forth. I found this to be profoundly be an appointment. He was appointed from a very, very deep source that is bringing recognition and light. And I rarely use this word, so because I'm using this, it's profound to me. Hope. I don't use hope a lot for quite a few reasons. But I believe that it is really profound for however many people come to this place for all of the reasons that Dr. Todd explained earlier. Why there? Why that date? Why the date on the 12th in 2012? Why in that place? All of those reasons that he explained earlier in the episode, if you weren't listening, rewind when you can, is really, really key. It's not random. I know it's not random. It's an assignment. And it's not only he was appointed to do this, but I feel like it's an invitation and possibly an appointment for you to come down to Maui as well and just see what happens. Thank you, Dr. Todd, for being here. Before we sign off, is there anything that you would like to, any message that you would like to leave with our very, very patient and loving humans?
Well, it has been, how you say, more of a marathon session, yet hopefully the terrain has been a useful enough journey to keep on the trek, as it were, to the mountaintop of the conclusion. And if there's another point that I would make in terms of conditioning a step to even greater capacity to create a desired reality, is that there's a step beyond hope, which is really important to get the greatest results, which is the step to certainty.
Beautifully said. The step to certainty. I love it. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Current Situation. Thanks for joining us.
Excellent.